Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. So I'm back here out working again on the pole barn project. It's been a busy couple weeks between work and rain and hurricanes. I haven't had a whole lot of time to get out here and work on the project, but we'll start off this morning. I want to show you a couple things I have been able to get done on the project. And then the main focus of today's video is going to be cutting our header beams for the eave wall, notching the posts on that wall, and then putting the headers up on the wall. And actually this will probably take me more than one day depending on how things go, but we're going to kind of wrap all this into one video of cutting the beams, notching the posts, and putting that support system into place on the eave wall. And then the next step beyond that is going to be putting up the roof rafters on this addition over here, and I'm going to tie that into the rafters on the main structure, which is always kind of an interesting thing to do. There's a lot of math and a lot of compromises involved in deciding the best place to tie those in. Sometimes it comes down to headroom that you need on your addition. Sometimes it comes down to the architecture, how you want things to look, and I've balanced both of those to decide how I'm going to do that. That really actually influences where the header beams go on the eave wall, because that determines the landing point of our rafters. And so a lot of thinking and planning has to go into this before you want to notch out your post for your header beams. And so I've been kind of thinking forward and working backwards, and I'm at the point today where I'm ready to put those header beams in. One major change for this project is going to be my roof. Now the main timber frame carport here has a metal roof. I'm a big fan of metal roofs. To me, it's faster, better. I like everything about a metal roof. And my original plan was to put a metal roof on the addition, tie it into the existing metal roof with a pitch brake transition flashing. I've done that many times before. It's really not complicated at all. You know, it'll come out looking good and match the original roof, but had kind of a issue with my roofing supplier. They quoted me the cost for the metal for the addition, which wasn't bad. Metal's gotten high. I knew that it was going to be high, and it wasn't bad, but then they told me there was going to be a $450 shipping charge on top of that. And in the past, the shipping charge has been $75. And so I asked for clarification, really didn't get anywhere with them, and I'm like, well, listen, y'all have just priced yourself out of contention for this project. Between the metal cost and the shipping for the metal, it was going to cost me more just to procure the metal for this addition than it's going to cost me to re-roof the addition and the entire structure with OSB and asphalt shingles, which, you know, does have a benefit. It's going to match my house, but that's more of a hassle for me. But it just doesn't sit well with me to pay $450 shipping just for a limited amount of roofing metal for an addition, when I can just do the whole thing over, unify it with a nice asphalt roof, and then, you know, the roofing metal on this main structure, I can reuse that in a heartbeat. In fact, I'm already thinking about the projects I had planned down the road. You know, I won't have to buy metal for those projects because I've already got it here. And so there's going to be a little bit of an additional hassle taking off the metal roof, but it'll go quickly. I'm not too worried about that. And in reality, I was going to have to take off this half of it anyways to properly cut the old panels and flash in the new roof. So there's not a whole lot of additional labor here, and I just feel better about not dumping, you know, $450 on shipping and paying for an inflated set of panels for the addition. So that's kind of a big change in terms of my planning, and I've been holding off on things because the math for the roof pitch and the transition is different depending on if you go with metal and asphalt, because of the way a pitch brake transition flashing works with metal roof. You actually have to step it down so that flashing goes under the existing roof and over the top of the new roof. There's going to be a bit of a break there. You don't have that break with you know, OSB or plywood and shingles on top of that. So there's an inch and a half of difference in how you work out your structure and where you place your header beam. So I've been, you know, waiting on that to resolve, and finally to the point where I'm like, you know what, I'm doing this OSB asphalt roof. I can now notch and place my headers. And so that's what we're going to do today. And so first thing I want to do though is show you what I've done in the last couple weeks just to catch you up, and then we'll get started with the new work. Okay, so in the previous one of the videos on this project, I mentioned how I was not putting wall girts up on this back wall because I really wanted to stagger them and tie them into the main structure, which at the time did not have a center post. And so one of the things I did the last weekend was to put up a center post in the middle of that back gable wall in the main structure, and that allowed me to tie some wall girts all the way across and bridge them into the new structure. And so that's really the main thing that I worked on last weekend to get this back wall pretty much complete. And that post right there, I needed a 16-foot post because I wanted to, go down into the ground and then tie all the way up as high as I could go with that structure. And so I had to laminate that because I cannot get a 16-foot 4x6 locally. And so those are some ground contact 2x6s that are laminated and nailed together to form that long post, and it worked out well. I actually threw it on the sawmill at the end to trim down the face for all the wall girts, so it was nice and smooth, and that came out really well. I did have to cut that post down to 14 feet, and this is over and over I run into this problem where I'm not thinking about things, and I want to get a 16-foot post from a hole in the ground all the way up to the top, but you can't stand up a 16-foot post inside of a structure that's only 16 feet high at the peak and then get it into the ground. So I have to relearn that every damn time, it seems like, and I had to cut that post short to about 14 feet so that I could pretty much wedge it into the ground and stand it up into place, but it's there now, and everything came out great on that back wall. So at this point, we can turn to marking and notching our posts on this eave wall to accept the header beam. One of the things I did a few days ago when we had a break in the rain is I came out here with my laser level and mounted it so that I could throw a mark on all of the posts on the original structure and then all of these eave posts on the new structure. And I ended up doing that in the evening just so the video would come out better, so you'll see some B-roll as I'm talking here. And really what that does is it gives me one consistent absolute reference on all of the posts from the main structure to the new structure, easier than using levels and strings. It did confirm that the wall girts I put in were pretty much on the money, but you don't want to depend on that. You really want to confirm it, and so that's what that laser did. And what I'm going to do now, I'll set up the GoPro and start filming this. I'm just going to measure from that mark up to where I know my notch needs to be for the header beam, and everything takes off from there. All right, so there's the final markings. I came back with a Sharpie on this post just to make it more visible to the camera, but there's the markings where I'm going to take out my notch for the header beam. I had cut 4-inch by 8-inch header beams. I've notched this so that that beam is going to sit proud of the outside face of this post by 1.5 inches, which will match
my wall girts, and so when I put the siding up, it'll be able to go continuously up from the girts up to this header. And I always do that on pole barns, whether I'm using double 2x lumber or a custom cut header beam. I always like to have that header sit proud by 1.5 inches so that it matches up with the wall girts. So at this point we're ready to cut. I guess one thing I want to stress is after you mark out your notches, just double check everything, and do that on, you know, all of the posts. I've made mistakes doing this before, and it's not pretty when you mess up where you notch for your header beam. Sometimes you can recover from that pretty easily. Other times it's a real pain because you've got your posts in the ground, you got everything set up. The last thing you want to do is mess up the location of your notches. So my advice there is just double check this stuff real good before you break out the saw. All right, so there's all our notches, and you know, there's a bunch of ways you could notch post. If I was doing this on a workbench, I would do it differently, but when I'm working with upright posts and up on a ladder, I found it's easiest just to make four main cuts with a skill saw, then clean it up with a Sawzall, and if needed, you can go back with a chisel or a utility knife and, you know, clean up any leftover splinters. But this does a really good job. We've got some nice clean notches, and so next thing I'm going to do is put some joining hardware on that third post over where the two beams will meet. All right, so here's a header beam. It's notched in and bolted into all the posts. You might have noticed as I was going through and bolting these down, I first used a Forstner bit to put a countersink hole, and that just lets me drop the washer and the head of the bolt down below the surface, so that later on when I come back and put my siding up, I don't have to play any games, you know, hogging out the back of the siding to go around a bolt head. I've had to deal with that in the past. I've just learned, you know, it's quicker to just countersink the bolts, get the heads out of the way. And so everything's done here. And again, that was a 4x8 Southern Yellow Pine beam. That's equivalent to about 2x10s sister together. But the 4x8 is easier to get out of a log. I can get that out of a little bit smaller log just because the diagonal of a 4x8 is kind of compact. And so that's a nice size if you got a sawmill and you can cut your own beams. You'll notice on this joint over here, I used some hardware to beef up that connection, and I want to go around and set up the camera. We'll talk about that next. All right, so here you can see what I did to beef up the connection where the two header beams come together. I really couldn't cut a long enough beam to cover the whole thing, so I have about a 15-foot section and 8-foot section that come together, and there's a joint here. If this was a 6x6 post, I wouldn't have any problem putting you know, 4 bolts into it with some washers behind it. But when using a 4x6 post, I don't like to put too many fasteners into that post in one place. I feel like that's just a weak connection to have so many fasteners concentrated in one spot on these narrower posts. So I'd like to use some kind of hardware to really spread out the fasteners. You know, you can put your fasteners closer together if there's metal involved, and that's really what we're doing here. We're basically spreading out the fasteners on the wood and you know, concentrating them into in metal brackets, which have more strength. And so I've done this a whole bunch of different ways over the years. Sometimes I'll make a plate out of steel and drill the holes in that for the bolts. In this case, I just went and looked through my scrap pile and see what I had, and I had some angle iron. So I basically cut a piece on each side of to go on each side of the post. Drilled the holes, painted it black basically, and then just bolted it up here. And we've got 2 bolts going through the post, and then 2 bolts into each header beam on each side. And that really just spreads the, you know, the fasteners out, and it makes a nice strong attachment point where you're, you know, we at one junction here we've got 2 4x8 headers on a 4x6 post, and this is just a real good way to handle that junction and all the fasteners and keep everything strong. And so you know, again, if you were using a 6x6, I'd probably just drill the bolts and not think about it, but with these narrower posts, it's good to have some structural hardware in your joints up here. So I think that's going to wrap things up for today. I've got the headers up, everything's bolted in nice, and the next thing I have to do is take the metal roof off of this side of the main structure, so that I can get up there and start to put my rafters up and join them into the main roof framing. I probably am not going to make a video on taking the metal roof off. I mean, that's just me, you know, backing off a zillion screws and moving panels of metal, so I can't imagine that'd be too interesting. So I think the next video will come back when I'm actually putting the rafters up and tying the roof structure of this addition into the roof structure of the original timber frame carport. So until then, thanks for watching.